It is great to see you here again. My name is Luc de Koster, founder of the Koster Academy. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the different contract types and risks associated with the contract type. Now, when we look at contracts, we have to look at different contract types. But before we continue, don't forget to click on the subscribe button, click on the bell button, and every time we have a new video, YouTube will inform you about it. So what's important about understanding contract types? Contracts influence the outcome of the project, and it's not only related to timing and quality, but there is also a very important cost factor. When we select a contract type, it is important to understand the nature of the work that has to be completed and what is the best contract type that we should use to avoid too high costs. We want to reduce the costs, we want to reduce the risks. So it's very important to understand what is the best contract type that we can select. Now, we can typically identify three main contract types. We have fixed price contracts, we have cost reimbursable contracts, and we have time and material contracts. So these are the main types of the contract types, but there are some subdivisions. So let's have a look a little bit more. Let's have a deeper look into the fixed price contracts, cost reimbursable contracts, and the time and material contracts. When we look at the fixed price contracts, we have in fact a contract where a fixed price is paid to the supplier of the product or the service. So there is no change. That's the fixed price. Now, there are some disadvantages, and we can, let's say, improve them by adding incentives or economical adjustments. So the typical fixed price contract, you sign the contract, that's the money what you get, whatever happens. But it's not always very fair to the supplier, and we can have some additional elements there. For example, when we would have a fixed price contract over a longer time, the time, let's say the indexation, the cost of money may have, let's say, an effect, and the original price may be overestimated. We also have cost reimbursable contracts. Now we have a price for the incurred cost, and the supplier gets a cost plus a percentage. We can also improve the contract here by adding incentives and awards. Time and material contracts. Here we have that we pay the material and the time separately. So basically they buy the materials and we pay the supplier for the time that it takes to, let's say, install the work or complete the work. But we have to have a deeper dive into these different types of contracts. And let's first start with the fixed price contracts. The first is the fixed firm price, or the FFP. We have a fixed price and there are no adjustments over time. You sign it, that's the cost. It's very good for it's not very good for the supplier, but very interesting for the receiver, for the customer. And certainly it is a disadvantage for the supplier when the contract duration is rather long and inflation effects are not really considered. So inflation may have a negative effect on the supplier's profit. Fixed price incentive fee, fixed FPIF. Now here we add an incentive fee to the contract. This incentive will motivate the supplier to complete the work faster or better, and also mainly used to finish the work faster. So when you finish the work faster, you will get a reward, an incentive, an additional payment on top of the fixed price. Fixed price with economic adjustments, so FPEPA. We have the economic adjustments considered over time the value of money and inflation. And we look at the initial time of the contract, and then we see to the economical indices that we can use to adjust the payments after a certain time. Most of the contracts I was working with the state contracts, they were fixed price with economic adjustments. So basically these elements are there. And when we saw, for example, every month when the supplier or the company sent in the bill, we were taking into account the economical indices to adjust the price, and it was automatically adjusted into the payment system. We also have cost reimbursable contracts. We have cost plus a fixed fee. Now we have a basic parameter of the contract are the costs incurred by the seller, and the buyer agrees to add a fixed amount to the cost. There is no compensation for additional work or time-related effects. It's typically a percentage that is added to the cost. Cost plus incentive fee. Here we have an incentive fee. So when we have, let's say, the incurred cost, there is an incentive that will be given in case there are savings, and they can be shared between the buyer and the seller. We had some contract like that where a company was responsible for the heating installation in some army base, and they could do some improvements. They improved the contract, they improved the installation, and the money that was saved was split 50-50. We had a lot of problems with that because the state doesn't like that, but the contract existed like that, and it could be a very good solution in certain cases. Cost plus an award fee. We have all the incurred cost, but the majority is based on the way the seller satisfied the broad subjective performance criteria. So here we have an award that is added to the cost, taking into account the performance criteria that have been set up before. We have the time and material contracts. Here we have some different contracts also. We have a typical time and materials contract. It's also cost and time contracts. The time and materials contracts have elements of fixed price and cost reimbursable contracts. They're basically hybrid contracts. The nature of the contract may lead to the fact that the supplier will increase the time to complete the work and artificially increasing the revenue for the seller. It's like you say, okay, how much you pay for painting my room? You have a fixed price. Or the people say, okay, that's the number of hours, pay me by the hour, and the people work slower. Basically, you have to pay more. So these are always the decisions we have to make when we're looking at contracts. Now you have to use it with care, and you have to have a very precise statement of work and some additional clauses that you maybe add. Typical use of time and material contracts are, for example, staff augmentation, acquisition of experts, outside support, things like that. Another important element to consider are the contract types and the risk. Who is carrying the risk? We have the fixed price contracts, and fixed price is typically for the seller. So all the risks are in fact for the seller. There are no risks for the buyer. Then we have the cost plus fixed fee. This is for the buyer. So we have to pay all the costs, and there are more costs for the buyer. So it's basically more risk for the buyer in this case. Cost plus incentive fee is basically for both, but the buyer has most of the risks, and the incentive fee is there to keep the costs down. And last, we have time and material. Here the risks are typically for the buyer. The buyer bears most of the cost due to the time parameter. So that was it about the different contract types, what different contract types you can find, and you can identify which type of the contract would be the best for your project. It's very important to understand what those different types of contracts are and who is in fact having the risk. You try to find a win-win situation, but in some cases, if it's a one-time job, you don't care about it. Each party wants to win, and you have to be sure that you are managing this, in fact, with your project in the view and not the profit of the seller. So that was it for those contract types. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button, click on the bell button, and every time we have a new video, YouTube will inform you about it. Thank you very much and bye bye.